Professor Andy Neeley, Deputy Director of AIM Research, thank you for talking to the AIM Practice video here today. First of all, these industry-academia collaborations, how important are they?
I think they're extremely important and becoming more so as time goes by. One of the reasons is that increasingly there are big challenges society faces. We need to worry about how we deal with climate change, with economic challenges, with population growth. Big problems require lots of people to think about them, and industry academic collaboration is one way of thinking about those challenges.
So there's always an end goal that you see a problem and then you think if we get industry and academia together, they may be challenged, but they can solve those problems.
I think there's normally an end goal in these research collaborations. Sometimes the end goal is further away, it's more distant than on other occasions. So sometimes you may have collaborative research which is, if you like, short-term focused on particular immediate problems. But also there are some really interesting questions about long-term trends in society, how organisations will change in the future, that might require a bit more forward thinking, if you like, a bit of foresight in the research.
Well, who do you work with, Professor Neeley, and how long has it taken to build up those collaborations? Presumably some of those relationships must go back years.
So through AIM Research, we work with about 40% of the FTSE 100 firms, a wide range of small firms, through a network of individual academics who do a whole range of projects on innovation, services, productivity, practices inside organisations.
So with names like Rolls-Royce, IBM, sort of.
So to name a few organisations that you may have come across, personally I work at the moment with British Aerospace, with IBM, with Caterpillar directly.
Is it easy to establish these partnerships? And what about breaking into new ones? Or do you just get stuck in a rut with the same old people working together?
So establishing partnerships takes time, inevitably. There's a process of getting to know each other, of learning about how the other party works. It's about building relationships with the organisation, if you like. So that inevitably takes a period of time for both the university or the academics and business to work together. Then what tends to happen is two things. Often the partnerships grow, so you end up, particularly with large organisations, meeting new people in different roles, in different business units, so your network inside the organisation grows. And of course, often those people that you are working with move on to other firms, other organisations, and they will sometimes take the relationship with them, and then you end up building new collaborations with a different variety of firms.
So it is word of mouth, if you like, verbal recommendations from one to the other. But what about networks or cold calling? I mean, if an industry partner had a problem they wanted to solve, how would they know to come to you? Or might they go elsewhere? Is it through word of mouth? Is it through those important networks?
So connections between universities and industry, I think, come through a variety of different mechanisms. Often from the university side, teaching is an important role, because if you are teaching executives, you end up meeting people in firms who get to learn about some of your ideas or your research. Publishing matters. I've had a number of people, in fact I was in a meeting yesterday with somebody who'd picked up an article that I'd written, got interested in it, and then asked me to go and talk to them about some of the ideas in the article. So there are all sorts of different ways in which these connections take place. The key thing is, I think, being responsive, and then also trying to understand your other partner. You know, what are they really looking for in this collaboration?
And do you, within a collaboration, immediately have a eureka moment and think, oh, that's a winning idea, that's a successful idea? Or are those words perhaps pejorative, you know, successful, winning? It may take a longer term perspective to bring a collaboration to fruition.
I think the most fruitful collaborations I've had have lasted over quite long time periods. So you gradually get to know the organisation, you gradually get to know more about some of their challenges, you gradually get better access to the organisation as well. You have to bear in mind, the first time you meet somebody in an organisation, they're not going to open up to you completely and tell you all of their biggest issues, all of their biggest challenges. But as you work with them, as you get to know the people, then they're much more likely to be receptive to allowing you to see bigger challenges that they might have. And in turn, that leads to more interesting research questions.
And what about delivering on the promises? You might have an informal agreement, you might have a formal agreement, but if you're managing expectations, it must be necessary to, if you like, smooth out the conflicts, because academia, people sitting in labs by themselves scratching their heads, and industry always being targeted to the next market, perhaps 18 months, timescales must value. So there are inherent conflicts in those relationships.
There are definitely inherent conflicts, and I think one of the things about timescales, one of the do that again. There are inherent conflicts, and I think one of the things that really matters about timescales is being clear what's feasible and what's not feasible. So I often say to the industry partners I'm working with, look, actually you shouldn't ask us in the university to look at problems that you are going to face in the next 12 or 18 months. Because the reality is you will solve those problems. You have to put the resource on them. You've got more resource than the university. So you'll solve the short-term problems. The thing the university is really good at looking at is things that are 3 to 5 years away. They're the next problem that's going to come and affect you. And we've got, to a certain extent, the luxury, and it is a luxury, to be able to reflect on some of those problems that are not years away, but actually are ones that you wouldn't necessarily get round to in your firm in terms of thinking about them at this particular stage. So I think being clear about the right role for the university in terms of timescale is fundamental.
And that's part of managing the expectations in a global world where, you have changes of government, you have language, cultural differences. Expectations is a key word in these partnerships.
Yeah, if I had to think about the sort of 3 things that I would say were most important in collaborations, it would be building relationships, it would be managing expectations, and then it would be delivering on your commitments. And part of delivering on your commitments is to manage the expectations in the right way, to be realistic about what you can and cannot do, and to make sure you deliver what you promised.
Revelations from working with others. As I said, that these relationships are often global today. Does something come to fruition when you thought perhaps it wouldn't? Does someone prove not to be able to deliver what they promise? There must be, if you like, quite a lot going wrong, as well as those success stories at the end of the day.
Yes, it's like all things in life. There are things that happen that go according to plan. There are things that go off plan. Sometimes you can get them back on plan. Sometimes, actually, when things go off plan, something really interesting happens. So you can have situations where, in a deep collaboration, particularly when there's a high level of trust, you might end up exploring something that you didn't originally set out to explore, but that actually proves to be a really fruitful line of research inquiry. So it's not all planned, absolutely.
And would you use the words eureka, revelation? What words come to mind? That sounds like, serendipity and the next breakthrough you've just described.
I wouldn't necessarily use eureka No, I'll do that again. I think breakthroughs in collaborations with industry are relatively rarely are they eureka moments where you suddenly go, wow, we've changed the world here. It's much more of a gradual process of discovery, of exploring the new boundaries, if you like, of coming up with new ideas, of trying them in organisations, seeing how they work, then evolving the ideas. So it's a much more iterative and gradual process than the classic picture of someone sitting in the bath going, yes, I've discovered something.
Is that
I'm
what
not sure I want that in the video.
No, it's all right, we did. Is that what... Sorry, what goes... Question.
Yep.
Is that what industry wants? Does it want a breakthrough? Does it want profit? Or does it just want guidance, mentoring, caring for and nurturing as it proceeds towards the midterm?
I think industry wants a number of things from collaboration. So clearly, if you're talking about the private sector, there's a profit motivation or an efficiency motivation. How do we do things better for our customers? How do we serve our markets more effectively? So there's certainly a commercial motivation, but there's also an enormous interest in industry to explore new ideas. The world is constantly changing, and everybody's trying to understand what's happening in the world, how we should respond, how we react in the future. Industry is just as inquisitive about those things as academics are. And so if you can get the relationship right between the two, you can have some really fruitful conversations about how we might cope with a changing world.
In that changing world, Professor Neeley, you have private and public information sources. Is there, if you like, a problem in managing those two different information sources because of the different values underpinning them? Public information is very sensitive, and we've seen that on a number of occasions.
Yes, I mean, I think you have to, in terms of managing information, you have to be very clear about the boundaries of what information you have access to that is, if you like, privileged or confidential, and how you manage that information. You have to be responsible in this process, professional, in the sense of understanding which things you can talk about publicly, which things you can't talk about publicly. They're the private conversations or the private information.
Any tips on that sort of sensitive information, just to establish the boundaries of the relationship when you begin?
I think it's really important to be clear about what is for public consumption and what is for private consumption. So often organisations will ask you to sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, which protect their information. I've never had a problem publishing research work done with an organisation, providing I go back to them and say, this is what I'd like to publish, are you okay with it? And they will often review it, and they're often very sensible with their comments and critique of the work. So I think providing you manage the relationship well, it's not really an issue.